The galaxy was quiet, too quiet. In the deep void where stars burned cold and far away, the great Galactic Empire stretched across thousands of systems. Its fleets patrolled the darkness. Its soldiers ruled with iron fists. And its people believed no power could ever challenge them. For centuries, they had crushed every rebellion, every uprising, every alien who dared to resist. They believed they were eternal, unshakable, unstoppable. But silence has a weight, and sometimes silence hides something waiting to be born. It began with whispers, signals picked up by remote listening stations at the edge of Imperial space. They were faint, irregular, but not natural. The patterns repeated like language, like voices calling across the void. The commanders laughed at first, calling it interference, the ghosts of old satellites. But when entire fleets began to vanish, the laughter stopped. The first fleet was small, only a few cruisers, sent to a dead sector. They reported strange movements on their sensors, faint energy spikes, sudden magnetic storms, echoes of ships that were never there. Then silence, no wreckage, no distress call, nothing but empty stars. The second fleet was larger, a full battle group, armed and prepared. They too vanished. One transmission escaped, a broken voice screaming, "They are here." Before the signal was torn apart, no one knew who they were. The Emperor ordered silence. The public was told nothing. But inside the high halls of the Empire, fear spread like poison. Generals argued, admirals demanded answers, and spies searched for the source. Still, the whispers grew louder. It was a scout ship, a small vessel, that finally returned. The crew were pale, their eyes wide with terror. They spoke of shadows moving in space, of ships too fast, too silent. They spoke of weapons that cut through shields like paper. They spoke of enemies who never stopped fighting, even when burning, even when dying. One officer, trembling, whispered a line that chilled the room. "They are not like us. They fight different." The council laughed, but not with joy, with fear. The word spread. A new species had risen from the edge of darkness. The Empire had found humans. Or perhaps, the humans had found the Empire. The first records of humanity were old, buried deep. In forgotten archives, a small species from a blue planet, primitive, not worth notice. The Empire had dismissed them centuries ago, leaving them to die in their wars. No one expected them to survive, let alone grow strong. And yet, here they were, returning with ships, with weapons, with courage no one could explain. The admiral of the scout fleet stood before the Emperor. He bowed, but his voice shook. "This is no rebellion, no simple uprising. They fight with a will we have never seen. If these are only their first forces, then I must ask, where is the rest of their army?" The Emperor's eyes narrowed. His voice was calm, but the hall was heavy with silence. "Then we shall find them and crush them, as we crushed all others." But in the dark, the whispers continued. Soldiers spoke of humans who never surrendered, who used traps, who vanished into shadows. Captains told stories of enemy ships appearing out of nowhere, attacking, then melting back into the void. Some claimed they saw soldiers fighting even after their bodies should have fallen. Fear crept through the ranks, and beyond the edges of imperial maps, humanity waited. They had been silent for centuries, silent while the Empire mocked them, silent while the Empire forgot them. But silence was never weakness, it was patience. Now the storm was coming, and the Empire had no idea how unprepared it was. For the first time in generations, the great Galactic Empire felt something it had long forgotten. Not anger, not pride, not arrogance, but fear. And fear is the first crack in any empire. In the cold silence of space, a single human transmission slipped past Imperial jammers. It was short, simple, and terrifying. "We are coming." The message echoed across hidden channels, bouncing from one system to another. Imperial officers tried to erase it, but it spread. Too far. Soldiers heard it in their barracks. Merchants whispered it on trade routes. Smugglers carried it across black markets. The words became a curse, a prayer, a warning. "We are coming." The Empire had faced countless enemies before, but this time, something was different. The silence was different. The fear was different. And in the shadows of forgotten worlds, the human fleet gathered, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The storm was coming. The silence before it was only the beginning. The Galactic Empire prepared its fleets, confident as always. To them, war was a routine, a machine of control. But this war was not routine, and this enemy was not like the others. The humans had revealed themselves only in shadows, whispers, and fragments of lost fleets. No one inside the Empire had truly seen them fight. Not in full, not in open battle. That was about to change. The order was clear. A massive Imperial fleet was sent to crush a human colony on the edge of known space. It was a small outpost. The kind the Empire believed could not resist. Dozens of warships surrounded the world, their engines glowing like burning suns. The admiral of the fleet smiled. Certain victory was already his. Imperial broadcasts rang through the skies. Surrender, your world, and you may live. But no answer came. The silence was long, heavy, and cold. Then a single human voice replied, calm and sharp. You should not have come here. The battle began. Imperial ships opened fire, energy beams tearing across space. Explosions lit up the void. But the humans were already moving. Their ships were smaller, weaker in appearance, yet they moved like predators, fast and unpredictable. One moment they were in front of the fleet. The next they vanished into shadows. When they reappeared, they struck. With deadly precision, an Imperial captain shouted in rage, "They cannot stand against us. Press forward." But forward was a trap. The human ships turned, surrounding their attackers with impossible speed. They struck engines, targeting weak points. The Empire never thought could be found so quickly. Cruisers exploded one after another. The admiral watched in disbelief as his great armada began to crumble. On the ground, human soldiers fought differently too. They were outnumbered, surrounded, yet they never broke. They moved in silence, striking and vanishing. Their weapons, simple but effective, Imperial soldiers spoke later of the fear. They did not retreat. They did not hesitate. They kept coming. The admiral's confidence cracked. These were not primitive fighters, not broken survivors. They were soldiers who understood war in a way the Empire had forgotten. Each human seemed to fight as if the battle was personal, as if surrender was not even an idea. In desperation, the admiral ordered his entire fleet to unleash full bombardment on the planet. The sky turned to fire. The ground shook with destruction. When the flames cleared, the humans were still there, damaged, bloodied, but standing. And they smiled. That smile spread terror deeper than any weapon. A desperate Imperial officer whispered, "This cannot be their whole strength. It is impossible." And the admiral remembered the chilling words from the captured humans in the past. "You have not yet seen our army." The battle was no longer about conquest. It was about survival. The admiral called for retreat, his once proud voice trembling. But retreat was not simple. Human ships pursued, striking from shadows, cutting through the fleeing vessels. Half the fleet was destroyed before the rest escaped, limping back to Imperial space. When the survivors arrived, they brought fear with them. They spoke of humans, who laughed in the face of death. They told stories of human warships that vanished and reappeared like phantoms. They swore they saw soldiers fighting even as fire consumed them. The Empire tried to silence these tales, calling them exaggerations. But the whispers spread faster than the censors could erase them. In secret chambers, Imperial advisors begged the Emperor to consider negotiation. But the Emperor only said, "If this is their first army, then we will show them the power of the Empire." Still, doubt flickered in his eyes, and beyond the borders, humanity watched. The first encounter had been a warning, not a full strike. A whisper carried across hidden channels. If one colony can stand against an Empire fleet, imagine what the rest of us can do. In the void of space, the truth was forming like a storm cloud. The Empire had faced humanity for the first time, but this was not the end. This was only the beginning, and the question that haunted every Imperial commander was simple. If this small human force could cause such terror, what would happen when the Empire finally met their whole army? The Empire was built on fear, but it was fear-controlled. Fear of the Emperor, fear of the fleet, fear of the soldiers who enforced his will. Now, for the first time in centuries, that fear was turning inward, not towards the throne, but towards something outside their rule, something they could not fully see but could no longer deny. It began with the survivors. Frightened officers limped back from the border, their ships scarred and broken. They spoke of battles where numbers meant nothing, of enemies who should have fled yet never did, of weapons that were simple but struck with precision that felt inhuman, and worst of all, of laughter, human soldiers smiling as if death itself was their companion. The Emperor's advisors dismissed the reports, calling them exaggerations born from panic. But fear has its own way of spreading. It travels faster than light, faster than orders. It moved through the barracks first, whispered from soldier to soldier. "They don't run," one man muttered. "They fight until nothing is left. They come from shadows," another whispered. "Ships that vanish and reappear, ghosts in the dark." Soon, every soldier had heard the stories. Whether true or not, whispers grew into rumors and rumors turned into dread. On distant colonies, civilians began to ask questions. What if the humans came here? What if the fleets could not protect them? Merchants refused to travel near human-controlled sectors, fearing ambush. Entire trade routes slowed to silence. The fear reached deeper, into the heart of the Empire. One admiral, once proud and unshakable, was found awake in his quarters for days. He stared at the stars, muttering, "They are not like us, they do not fear death." Another captain refused to take his ship out of dock. When asked why, he whispered, "Because I have seen the future, and the future is human." The Imperial Council grew restless, generals argued, pounding their fists against the table. "We are the greatest power in the galaxy," they shouted. "How can a forgotten species make us tremble?" But their voices shook, their anger thin, for deep inside, even they wondered. If this was only the beginning, what would the full storm look like? Spies were sent to learn more. Silent probes slipped into human-controlled space. Many never returned. Those that did brought back fragments, strange signals, new ship designs, colonies training in secret, and always the same chilling phrase hidden in intercepted transmissions: "We are coming." The Emperor himself grew restless. He summoned the survivors, demanded details of every encounter. But the more he listened, the more silent he became. His golden throne felt heavier, his palace darker. For the first time in his long reign, he wondered if perhaps the Empire was not eternal. Perhaps it could fall. The whispers became louder when a human prisoner was brought before the council. He was young, scarred from battle, yet his eyes burned with fire. The interrogators asked him questions for hours. He gave no answers, only silence. At last, an admiral slammed his fist on the table. "Tell us where your fleet hides," he demanded. The prisoner only smiled and in a calm voice said, "You have not yet seen our army." That one line broke the chamber. Some shouted in rage, others fell silent. The words spread across the palace like poison. Every servant, every guard, every clerk repeated them in whispers. "You have not yet seen our army." The Empire tried to bury the fear, but it was too late. Even in the core worlds where the skies were filled with imperial banners, people looked at the stars differently. They no longer believed the Empire was untouchable. They began to believe the stories of humans rising from forgotten worlds, humans who had been left to die but survived, humans who now returned with fire in their eyes. The soldiers at the edge of space heard the whispers most of all. In the silence between patrols, in the darkness of their barracks, they asked themselves questions they never dared to ask before. What if we cannot win? What if this time we are the ones being hunted? And far away, beyond the reach of imperial censors, humanity listened. They knew their strength was not just in weapons or ships. It was in the fear they planted, fear that grew stronger every time a whisper was spoken, fear that spread faster than fleets could move. They did not need to show their full army. Not yet. The whispers would do the work for them. The Empire had always believed fear made them strong, but now that same fear was turning against them. It was slipping through cracks in their power, turning soldiers into doubters, commanders into cowards, and in the dark, the humans prepared. For fear was the first weapon they unleashed, and the next weapon would be war. The Galactic Empire had captured many enemies in its long history: rebels, pirates, aliens who resisted their rule. All of them eventually broke under interrogation. Some begged, some cried, some traded secrets to save their lives. The Empire always won in the end. That was what they believed. But when they captured the first, humans, something different happened. It was after the battle at the colony. Dozens of human fighters had been taken alive, dragged in chains to the interrogation halls. The Imperial officers expected screams, expected fear, expected men and women crushed by the weight of the Empire. Instead, they found silence. The humans stood straight, their eyes sharp, their faces calm. Some were wounded, some barely alive, but not one of them begged. The interrogators looked at one another, unsettled. Something about the way the humans stared at them felt wrong. It was not the look of prisoners, it was the look of hunters waiting. The first session began. An Imperial officer slammed his hands on the table, demanding answers. "Where is your fleet?" he shouted. "Where are your commanders hiding?" The human prisoner, blood running down his cheek, only smiled. Then he whispered, "You have not yet seen our army." The officer struck him, furious. But the human laughed, even. With blood in his mouth, he laughed. The guards shifted uneasily. Unused to this kind of defiance, every other prisoner before had broken after pain. But these humans seemed to grow stronger the more they suffered. In another chamber, a female human was questioned for hours. They promised her freedom. They threatened her family. They burned her skin with shock rods. She never spoke. When the interrogator finally asked why she remained silent, she looked into his eyes and said, "Because you are already losing. You just don't know it yet." The words shook him more than her silence ever could. The Empire tried new methods. They separated the prisoners, kept them alone in cold cells. Yet somehow, when guards walked by, they swore they could hear faint whispers, humans speaking, through the walls, comforting each other, keeping each other strong. Even without words, they carried a unity that chains could not break. The more time the Empire spent with their prisoners, the more uneasy they became. Soldiers who escorted them to interrogation reported strange feelings. One guard confessed, "When I looked into his eyes, I felt like I was the one being judged." Another swore he saw a prisoner smiling in the dark as if he already knew how the war would end. The council demanded results, but there were none. The humans gave no secrets, no coordinates, no information. All they gave were words that spread, like poison through the Empire's ranks. "You cannot stop what is coming. You have not yet seen our army. We are already among you." Fear spread faster than ever. Officers who once believed in Imperial power now questioned it. If these few humans, captured and chained, could inspire such dread, what would an entire human fleet do? Even the Emperor began to wonder if keeping them alive had been a mistake. Some advised execution to end the whispers before they spread further. Others argued to keep them, to study them, to learn what made them so unbreakable. But the truth was already clear. It was not their weapons, not their ships, not their strength that terrified the Empire the most. It was their spirit, a spirit that could not be crushed, not even in chains. Then, one night, something happened that the Empire could not explain. Alarms blared across the prison station. Lights flickered, doors sealed. When guards rushed to the cells, they found them empty. Every human prisoner was gone, no signs of escape, no broken locks, no ships detected leaving the station. They had vanished as if the shadows themselves had carried them away. The guards whispered of ghosts, of demons. The officers shouted of betrayal, accusing each other of sabotage. But no answers were found. Only silence remained. And in that silence, the whispers grew louder. If prisoners can vanish under our watch, if chains cannot hold them, then what hope do we truly have? The story spread quickly. Prisoners who vanished without a trace. Guards driven to madness. Words that haunted every soldier's dreams. The Empire tried to erase the tale, but it was too late. Every world, every barracks, every market whispered the same line. You have not yet seen their army. And far away, in hidden systems, the Empire could not reach humans prepared. Their missing brothers and sisters were not lost. They had returned home stronger, angrier, more determined than before. The Empire thought it had captured them, thought it had broken them. Instead, it had given humanity something far more powerful, a reason to fight harder, a reason to strike back. The prisoners of war had become legends, and legends were the most dangerous weapon of all. The Empire had always trusted its fleets, massive warships with armor thick as mountains, engines that could cross galaxies, and weapons that could burn worlds. To the people, those ships were symbols of safety. To the soldiers, they were symbols of power. But one by one, those symbols began to vanish. It started on the outer rim. A patrol group of 5 destroyers sent routine signals every hour. Then, without warning, silence. Search teams found nothing, not wreckage, not debris, not even drifting escape pods. It was as if the entire fleet had been swallowed by the void. At first, the Empire called it a malfunction. Engines exploding, a star's gravity pulling them in. But when it happened again, and then again, no one believed the excuses anymore. A carrier group disappeared next. Thousands of soldiers, hundreds of fighters, gone. The last message they sent was only 3 words. They are here. Then static. The Empire grew restless. Admirals doubled patrols. Commanders spread fleets thinner, searching every shadow in space. But the more they searched, the more ships disappeared. The shadows themselves seemed alive, hiding enemies no one could see. Rumors spread quickly. Some said human ships could cloak themselves, becoming invisible in the dark. Others whispered they could fold space, striking from impossible angles. A few believed something worse, that the humans didn't even need ships at all, that the void itself obeyed them. Fear crawled deeper. Captains refused to patrol alone, insisting on larger groups. Soldiers stared out of viewports, jumping at every flicker of light. When stars blinked, they wondered if it was a natural flare, or if humans were waiting just beyond sight. The Emperor demanded proof, demanded answers, but his generals had none. Every time they sent fleets to chase the whispers, they returned with nothing, or they did not return at all. One admiral, desperate to restore order, ordered his fleet to fire blindly into empty space. Dozens of plasma bolts lit the void, exploding against nothing. The crews cheered for a moment, believing they had hit something, but the silence after was heavier than before. No enemy, no wreckage, only shadows. On the core worlds, people began to whisper of the night hunters, stories of human ships appearing from darkness, striking, then fading like smoke. Children whispered the words to scare each other. Merchants used them to bargain for higher prices. Soldiers muttered them in fear. The night hunters are out there. The truth was worse than the rumors because the humans were not using one trick, not one weapon, not one tactic. They were using many. They attacked supply convoys, mining, stations, shipyards, always in different ways, sometimes fast and brutal, sometimes patient and silent. No one knew when or where they would strike, only that they would. The Imperial Council grew paranoid. They accused one another of incompetence, of hiding failures. They demanded tighter control of information, but even their own guards whispered in the halls. Whispers could not be silenced, not now. They grew stronger than orders, stronger than the Emperor's speeches. One captured recording slipped through. Imperial sensors, a shaky transmission from a dying ship. Through smoke and fire, a voice cried out, "They are everywhere." Then the feed cut off. That recording spread across markets, across hidden channels, across the hearts of every soldier who heard it. They are everywhere, and the humans knew what they were doing. They knew fear was the greatest weapon of all. They struck not just to destroy ships, but to plant terror in every survivor. Every time a fleet vanished, every time a message ended in screams, the legend grew. The shadows of space no longer belonged to the Empire. They belonged to humanity. The Emperor ordered the construction of more ships, larger than before, but some whispered it was useless. What good are bigger ships if they cannot fight the dark? They asked. No one had an answer. And beyond the edge of charts, in systems unmarked on Imperial maps, humanity watched. They did not need to show their full strength yet. Every vanished fleet was only a reminder. Every whisper was only a warning. The Empire thought it ruled the stars, but now it feared the stars themselves, because in every flicker of light, in every drifting shadow, in every patch of silence, the Empire saw them, the humans, the night hunters, the storm waiting to fall, and the whispers only grew louder. They are everywhere. The Empire could not admit it, but the truth was clear. Something was changing, something bigger than fear. Ships kept vanishing, soldiers kept whispering, and still the Emperor demanded control. So he gave an order: send a grand fleet. To crush the humans once and for all. The fleet was massive, the largest seen in a century. Hundreds of cruisers, destroyers, carriers, and dreadnoughts gathered at the edge of space. The admirals believed this show of strength would finally silence the whispers. We will burn their colonies, scatter their people, and drag their leaders in chains, they promised. But promises meant nothing when the storm was already coming. The fleet entered human territory with thunder, engines blazing, banners raised high. To the Empire, it felt like destiny. To the humans, it felt like an invitation. For days, nothing happened. Scouts searched every system, but no human fleets appeared. The admirals laughed, claiming the enemy was already broken. But the soldiers did not laugh. They saw the shadows moving, the stars, blinking in strange ways. Every silence felt heavier than the last. Then it began. The first attack came without warning. A small human force appeared from the darkness, only a handful of ships. The Empire roared with laughter. "Is this their army?" one captain mocked. Pitiful. The admiral ordered an attack, certain it would end quickly. But the battle did not end quickly. The human ships moved like ghosts, weaving through fire, striking engines, cutting shields. They fought with fury, with skill, with courage no machine could measure. And even as the Empire's overwhelming numbers pushed them back, the humans refused to flee. Every ship burned, but not one surrendered. When the last human vessel finally exploded, the admiral sneered. A waste of time. But then the stars changed. Sensors screamed with alarms. Thousands of signals appeared all at once, surrounding the fleet from every direction. At first, the officers thought it was an error. Then the void itself seemed to open, and the human fleet emerged. They came in numbers the Empire had not imagined. Ships of every size, painted black, engines burning like knives in the dark. Their formation was perfect, their timing flawless. The small force they had just destroyed had been bait, a sacrifice to lure the Empire into the trap. Panic spread through the command decks. "This cannot be," one officer stammered. "They cannot have this many ships." But the proof was before their eyes. Thousands of human warships, waiting, ready. The storm had arrived. The first wave struck hard. Human ships cut into the Empire's flanks, tearing through unprepared cruisers. Carriers exploded. Dreadnoughts shuddered under focused fire. Every Imperial formation collapsed into chaos. The admirals screamed orders, but their voices drowned in static and fear. The soldiers watched in horror as disciplined Imperial fleets trained for centuries, broke apart in minutes. This was not a rebellion, not a skirmish, not a desperate fight. This was war, real war, and the humans were masters of it. One admiral tried to rally his men. "We outnumber them," he cried. But his words meant nothing, because numbers did not matter. The humans fought as if every battle was personal, as if every life lost only fueled the fire of the living. Their ships moved like a storm, coordinated, yet unpredictable. The Empire realized they were not facing scattered colonies. They were facing an army, a true army. The retreat began in panic. Ships broke formation, fleeing in every direction. But the humans gave no mercy. They pursued, striking the weak, burning the strong, and letting only a few survivors escape. Those survivors carried back more than scars. They carried terror when they returned to Imperial space. They told the truth. They told of a human fleet larger than any they had imagined. They told of battles where courage defeated machines. They told of a storm rising that could not be stopped. The whispers became a roar. The storm is here, soldiers said. The storm is coming for us all. On the core worlds, riots began. People shouted that the Empire had lied, that the humans were not weak, that the humans were stronger than anyone. Fear turned into panic, and panic turned into rebellion. Far away in hidden systems, the humans prepared for the next strike. They had shown their strength, but not all of it. This was only the beginning, and as the storm spread across the galaxy, the humans whispered one promise. We are not finished. The Empire had wanted war. Now it had it. And the storm was only rising. The storm had broken the fleets, but what came after was worse. The fear that had once been whispers was now everywhere. Not only in the soldiers, not only in the commanders, but in the very heart of the Empire itself. The survivors who returned from the battle did not bring victory. They brought terror. They told stories of human fleets stretching across the stars, of thousands of ships striking at once, of tactics no one could predict, of soldiers who fought with laughter in their eyes, and of a storm that could not be stopped. The people listened and the people believed. On the core worlds, riots began. Merchants refused to send goods to the front lines, fearing their ships would vanish into the shadows. Civilians gathered in the streets, demanding answers the Empire could not give. They shouted at the banners of the Emperor. You lied to us, they screamed. You told us they were weak. The soldiers were no better. Entire regiments refused to deploy. They called the orders suicide. Some deserted, others hid, and a few even whispered that surrendering to the humans might be wiser than fighting. Them, in the barracks, one phrase echoed like a curse. They are everywhere. The Emperor called his council together. He pounded his fist on the throne, demanding silence, demanding loyalty. We are the greatest force the galaxy has ever seen, he roared. No army can stand against us. But his words rang hollow. The councilors lowered their eyes. The generals clenched their fists. Even in that grand hall, the shadow of fear was stronger than his voice. One general dared to speak. My Emperor, this war cannot be won the way we fight. The humans do not fear death. They do not fight as we do. Every fleet we send only feeds their legend. Another added in a whisper. We should have never awakened them. The Emperor's rage was fierce. He ordered executions, demanded obedience, but punishment could not kill doubt. Doubt was already in the blood of the Empire, spreading through every world, every fleet, every heart. And then the humans struck again, not with fleets this time, but with terror. They infiltrated communication networks, slipping past imperial firewalls as if they were paper. On every planet, on every soldier's screen, a single message appeared. We are coming. No matter how quickly the Empire tried to erase it, the words returned, over and over, on walls, on terminals, on broadcasts. We are coming. The people panicked. Markets closed. Ships fled to distant sectors. Factories slowed. Even the nobles who once trusted in the Emperor's power began to hide in their palaces. They locked their doors and prayed the humans would not come for them next. Meanwhile, in the fleets that still stood, captains grew desperate. Some ordered their ships to fire into empty space, terrified of the shadows. Others refused to leave dock, claiming their crews were too afraid to fight. An admiral tried to rally his men with a speech, but halfway through, half the soldiers walked away, not out of disrespect, but out of despair. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's great war machine was slowing, not from lack of fuel, not from lack of ships, but from lack of will. The humans had struck the Empire's true weakness, not its fleets, not its armies, but its faith in itself. The Emperor raged, but rage could not restore control. He sent out more envoys, more threats, more promises, but the humans answered with silence, and silence was worse than any threat, because in silence fear grows, and fear was everywhere. Fear in the eyes of soldiers who refused to march, fear in the voices of merchants who refused to trade, fear in the palaces of nobles who locked themselves away, fear in the council chamber where generals dared to whisper of defeat. One night, on the capital world itself, someone painted words on the palace wall. Not with weapons, not with fire, but with red paint for all to see. You have not yet seen our army. The guards erased it, but by morning it appeared again. By evening, the same words were written across the city. The people whispered them like a prophecy. The emperor could not silence it. And far beyond the reach of imperial power, humanity prepared. They had not even shown their full strength. The fleets that struck were only the beginning. The storm was not finished, it was only rising. The empire had once ruled through fear. Now it was ruled by fear. And that fear had a new name: humanity. The empire had always believed its core worlds were untouchable. The outer rim could burn, the border colonies could fall, but the heart of the empire was safe. It was the place where shipyards forged dreadnoughts, where factories built endless weapons, where nobles slept under banners of power. But one night, the sky above a core world burned and everything changed. It began with silence. The defense stations picked up nothing. No signals, no ships, only calm stars. Then the alarm screamed. Hundreds of human vessels appeared at once, bursting from the shadows faster than the defenders could react. The first target was not the cities, not the civilians, but the shipyards. Great stations that had built fleets for centuries turned to fire in minutes. Imperial commanders shouted, in disbelief, "How did they come here? How did they breach our heart?" But the humans did not answer. They only attacked with precision, striking supply lines, crippling engines, cutting down defenses one by one. The battle was chaos. Imperial fleets scrambled to respond, but the humans had already planned every move. When the defenders turned to protect the shipyards, the humans struck the fuel depots. When they turned to guard the depots, the humans vanished and reappeared behind them. Every choice the Empire made was wrong. Every move had already been predicted. Within hours, the pride of the Empire's fleet production lay in ruins. The skies filled with wreckage, the factories silent, the people staring upward in horror. They had believed the Emperor's promise of safety, and now that promise burned before their eyes. Word spread faster than fire. Across the galaxy, whispers turned to shouts. If the humans can strike the core, then nowhere is safe. On distant colonies, rebellions flared. On trade routes, convoys refused to move. Even soldiers on the front lines began asking the same question. If they can reach the capital worlds, why should we fight for the border? The Emperor raged. He demanded reports, demanded victories, demanded that someone explain how humanity had slipped through his fleets. But no one could explain. No one even understood how the humans moved so quickly. Some said they had new technology, faster than hyperspace. Others whispered they simply knew the stars better than the Empire ever had. But one truth cut deeper than all the others. The humans were not afraid. They did not fear the core. They did not fear the throne. They did not fear the Empire itself. For the first time, the Emperor considered retreat, not out of strategy, but out of survival. But his pride would not allow the word to be spoken, so he called for more fleets, more soldiers, more sacrifices. And the people saw through him. They saw his fear, even if he tried to hide it. Meanwhile, the humans did not linger. They struck hard, then vanished, leaving wreckage behind. No banners, no messages, no speeches, only silence. And in that silence, the people of the Empire trembled, because silence meant the humans could return at any time. Silence meant the war was no longer at the borders, it was everywhere. The tides of power were shifting. The Empire no longer hunted. The Empire was being hunted. The humans controlled not just battles, but the rhythm of the war itself. They decided when to strike, where to strike, and when to vanish. The Empire was left chasing shadows, bleeding strength with every move. One soldier wrote in his last letter, "We fight an enemy that does not fight for victory alone. They fight to destroy the very belief that we can win." And he was right, because with every battle, the humans shattered not just ships but hope. Rebellion spread faster. Colonies once silent now raised banners of resistance. Even alien species long crushed by the Empire began to rise again. The humans had lit a fire across the galaxy, and that fire was consuming everything the Empire thought it controlled. The Emperor tried one last act of defiance. He broadcast across every world, his voice thunderous. The Empire is eternal and these humans will fall. But even as his words echoed, New reports arrived. Another shipyard gone. Another fleet destroyed. Another rebellion begun. His speech meant nothing. The people no longer believed, and far from the throne, humanity prepared for the next step. They had shown the Empire its weakness. They had struck its heart and proved it could bleed. The tide was turning, and now the question was no longer if the Empire would fall, but when. The throne room was colder than it had ever been. The banners of the Empire hung heavy. Their colors faded in the dim light. The Emperor sat in silence, his eyes burning, but his hands trembling. For the first time in his long reign, he felt what his enemies wanted him to feel. He felt fear. Reports arrived every hour, each one worse than the last. Another shipyard lost, another fleet destroyed, another colony in rebellion. The words repeated again and again. Human forces sighted, human strike complete, human presence confirmed. Each report was like a hammer striking the walls of his pride. The counselors whispered of surrender. The generals whispered of retreat. But the Emperor had built his empire on power, not on retreat, not on mercy. And so he turned to desperation. Envoys were sent across the stars, carrying messages of peace. They promised negotiations. They offered treaties. They even spoke of shared rule. But the humans only laughed. One reply came across the channel, sharp as a blade. You wanted war, and now you will have it. The Emperor crushed the message in his hand, but the words burned in his mind. He tried another path. Propaganda filled the streets. Posters claimed the humans were weak, that their victories were lies. But the people no longer believed. They had seen the shipyards burn with their own eyes. They had heard the recordings of human voices saying, "We are coming." And no amount of lies could erase that truth. In his desperation, the Emperor ordered a final gathering. Every fleet, every ship, every soldier was to assemble for one last battle. If we destroy them in a single strike, he told his generals, we will break their spirit and restore the Empire's glory. But his words rang hollow. The generals obeyed, not out of loyalty, but because they had no choice. The gathering was enormous. Thousands of ships formed into lines that stretched across the stars, the greatest armada the Empire had ever created. The Emperor himself appeared on the command channel. His voice thundered, "Today we remind the galaxy who rules it." But deep inside he knew the truth. This was not strength, this was desperation. The battle began in silence. For long minutes, no human ships appeared. Some soldiers prayed they had already fled, that the storm had passed. But then the shadows moved and the humans arrived. They came not in hundreds, not in thousands, but in waves too vast to count. Ships dark as the void, engines glowing like fire. They moved as one, swift and deadly. The storm had come in full. The Emperor's fleets opened fire. Beams of light and plasma bolts filled the void. Explosions shook the stars, but the humans did not falter. They cut into the armada like knives through cloth. Formations broke, dreadnoughts cracked, carriers burned. The greatest fleet in history was dying before it even understood the battle. The Emperor shouted for courage, for honor, for loyalty, but his words were drowned by screams. Admirals called for retreat. Captains begged for reinforcements. None came. The humans pressed forward, ruthless, unstoppable. One Imperial commander cried, "This is not war, this is execution." And he was right. The humans were not simply fighting for victory. They were fighting to end the Empire. Desperation turned to madness. The Emperor ordered his own ships forward, demanding they fight too. The last. He swore he would never surrender, never kneel, But even as he raged, his council abandoned him. Some fled, some hid, some even sent secret messages to the humans, offers of loyalty if they were spared. The Emperor sat alone on his throne, his empire crumbling, his fleets burning, his people rioting. For the first time he saw the truth. He had awakened an enemy he did not understand, an enemy who did not fight for power, or wealth, or even survival. They fought for something stronger. They fought because they refused to bow. And as the storm consumed his empire, the Emperor whispered to himself, "Perhaps we were never eternal. The desperation of the throne could not stop the tide." The Empire's last stand was already turning into its last breath. The Empire was burning, its fleets shattered, its worlds in rebellion, its throne drowning in silence. The storm of humanity had come and swept across the stars. But what the Empire did not yet understand was that the storm was only the beginning. On the edge of a ruined system, the last fragments of the Imperial Armada gathered. Broken ships, scarred soldiers, commanders who no longer spoke of victory, only survival. They looked at the wreckage of their proud fleets and knew the truth. The Empire was dying. And then the humans appeared. They came not as shadows this time, not as whispers, but openly, proudly, filling the skies with their warships. The survivors stared in silence. Even after all they had seen, the sight was beyond belief. It was not hundreds of ships, not thousands, but wave after wave, more than the stars could count. The Imperial Admiral on the flagship trembled. "This cannot be their whole force," he whispered. "It cannot." He turned to his officers, but none answered. Their eyes were fixed on the endless fleets unfolding. Before them, a transmission came through. The face of a human commander appeared, scarred but calm, his voice carried across every channel. "This war is over," he said. "Your empire is broken." But then he leaned forward, his eyes cold. "And understand this, you have not faced our full strength." The word struck harder than any weapon. The officers froze. The soldiers whispered. Not their full strength, not their full army. What had they been fighting all this time? The human commander continued. "You thought you were fighting us, but you have only faced our scattered colonies, survivors, veterans, fragments of what we truly are. You fought the wounded hand, not the clenched fist." The admiral's breath caught. If this was not their full force, then where was it? How much larger, how much stronger, how much deadlier could they be? Behind the commander, the screens showed. More fleets gathering, vast armadas from hidden systems. Ships older than the Empire itself. Ships newly built with fire and steel. Billions of humans united, not scattered, not weak, but one. The message spread faster than fire, across the galaxy. Soldiers, civilians, rebels, and nobles heard it. And the truth crushed what little spirit the Empire had left. The humans had never been fighting with everything. They had been patient. They had been testing. And now, they revealed the truth. The war the Empire thought it was losing was not even the real war. It was only the opening strike. The Emperor heard the words from his throne, his face pale, his hands shaking. For decades, he had called humanity forgotten, weak, unworthy of memory. Now he saw them as they were, not ghosts, not rebels, not shadows, but a force so vast it could tear empires apart and keep moving. Panic swallowed the core worlds. Some surrendered to the humans immediately, others begged for protection, and still others fell into chaos. Riots tearing cities apart before the humans even arrived. The very thought of a greater human army waiting beyond the stars destroyed the will to resist. The admiral of the broken fleet lowered his head. "What are we fighting for?" he asked, his voice hollow. "No one can stand against this." And for the first time, Imperial ships surrendered in masses, not from battle, but from fear of what had not yet come. The human commander spoke once more. "You called yourselves eternal, but eternity belongs to no empire. It belongs to those who refuse to break. We are humanity, and we are only beginning." The transmission ended, but the silence that followed was worse, because in that silence, the truth settled across every corner of the galaxy. The Empire had not been defeated by the full force of humanity. It had been defeated by fragments, by whispers, by shadows. The real army had yet to rise, and in that silence, the galaxy shuddered. For if fragments of humanity could destroy an empire, what would happen when the whole of humanity stood together? The revelation was complete. The storm had only begun,